Thank you, Natalie. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Anka Vlad, and I've been working at the UK Data Service for the past 7-8 years now in the Research Data Services team. So today we'll be talking about ReShare. So ReShare, how to deposit data. We'll do a run through the system. And we'll reply to any questions you might have as well. So just to give a brief overview, I'm also going to stop my camera now so we can focus on the presentation. Okay, so a brief summary. So we'll start with a short overview of ReShare and how it works. And then we will go through different aspects of the data deposit process, such as documentation, a data sharing checklist, how to organize files. We'll talk about access as well. And finally, we'll go to the demo. And then, of course, we will answer your questions at the end. Just to quickly mention that pretty much all the information that we're going to go through today is highlighted in terms of the presentation, but we'll be touching on the most important aspects of the data deposit and how the system works. But there is, of course, more detailed information available on our website, and we have various training materials online and on YouTube, and the links are also provided at the end of this presentation for you to read on later. And of course, the slides will be made available on our website as well, and the recording on YouTube. Okay, so let us begin. So firstly, what is ReShare? So it is UK Data Services online. It's a self-deposit repository where researchers can create their own collections, and so therefore they can share their research data and publish it for others to use. So it allows depositors to create data collections themselves and upload data files and documentation files in the system. And once completed by depositors, the collections go into a review area where we check them for disclosure risk, for copyright issues, validity of file formats, if there's enough documentation as well, all those aspects. All numerical data files and at least 10% random sample of textual data files are reviewed, and then published data collections can be accessed from the UK Data Service data catalog, and from other data catalogs as well, such as the CESDA data catalog, CESDA being the European Consortium of Data Archives. So I included a link to our website here, and we're also going to have a look at that later on when we do the demo, how to find collections perhaps that you can use as an example as well. But of course, you also have the link here for when you'll be using the slides later. Okay, so I included here a map of the deposit process, just so that we are able to visualize the steps a bit better. So we can see actions done by the depositor, so by yourself at your end, and then the actions done by us once you submit the collection for review. So the depositor will need to register and then log in, create the metadata record, then upload the data files and the documentation files, also choose the access and license conditions, license information, and submit the record for review once that is finished. At our end, of course, once we receive it in review, we do all those checks that I mentioned earlier, and then we publish it if it's ready to be published. If it's not ready to be published, then these two areas so the record can move between these two areas. Once we review it, if there's anything, if there are any further actions that we think, or if any further edits, then we can send it back to the depositor work area, where the depositor can do any edits that are still required, and then they can push it back again into review for hopefully publication once the edits have been addressed. Okay, so there is I included here a data sharing checklist. So really there are a variety of ways in which we can we protect participants' identities while ensuring that we comply with legal and ethical obligations. And we referred this to this as a three-step approach. So of course, under the latest data protection legislation, there are 6 processing grounds for personal data. So you might choose one over the other based on project-specific considerations or guidance from your institution. If, however, the processing ground you choose is consent, so this, of course, will need to be informed and granular. By granularity here, I mean that so if you're collecting different types of data in your project, then each type of data should be addressed separately in the consent form and the information sheet. So at the point of deposit, when I mentioned that you'll have to upload documentation files, blank versions of the consent form and information sheet will also be needed, just so that we can check what the participants have agreed to. Okay, then that is the first step. Following from this is ensuring that that we protect participants' identities all the time in line with what they have agreed in their consent form. So this can be done by pseudonymizing or anonymizing the data. It might be that you don't need to collect someone's personal information, or you can restrict the amount of personal information you collect. So I'm referring here to the principle of data minimization. So only really collecting the data that we absolutely need for our projects, not more. And the third aspect to consider here is access regulation, which is normally needed for data that even after anonymization and pseudonymization will still contain a residual risk of disclosure, or that the data cannot be anonymized sufficiently without reducing its reuse potential. So here access is once the collection comes into review, of course you will have to, or the depositor will have to select this information when they create the collection. In ReShare, however, we also review this once it comes into review, once we can have a look at all the project-specific information, all the metadata, all the consent forms, just making sure that they align. That the level of anonymization is appropriate, or pseudonymization, and that is matches what the participants have agreed to. Just a quick note here to remember to do. So please make sure to store personal or sensitive data securely and separately. Separately here is meant separate from data that has been anonymized or pseudonymized. And to use encryption and consider where the data and the files are being stored. For more information on this, we have a data management webinar. It ran last week, but the recording should still be, it should be available on YouTube. So do have a look at that if you need more information. Okay. Moving on, let's look at how best to document our data to make sure that it is ready to be archived and published. So the most important things about documentation is simply that we need to ask ourselves if the data we're sharing would allow other users with no prior knowledge of the data to understand it and and reuse it correctly in their project. So what information would they need to make sense of it? right? Planning to archive as well, and in particular where to archive data, where to share your data is important here as well, because there might be, you know, different archives and different repositories might have different guidance or formats or metadata standards. So it's always best to check in advance. So if you're planning on you know, sharing the data in your local repository at your, if your institution, if your university, for example, has, excuse me, has its own repository, then we'd advise to consult with them in advance so that you can prepare this, and you know what needs to be done, and how your files need to be prepared, what formats you can use, and what metadata you need to prepare as well. So at the UK Data Archive, we archive this. So we use this documentation as well when it comes to reviewing the records we receive in ReShare. It allows us to ensure that we conduct, you know, accurate processing and the data disclosure review before we can publish the data. Okay, and project level documentation. So this includes information about the study. So what were the main research questions, for example, the type of data that was collected to answer these questions. And then data level documentation includes information at the level of individual data files, such as one single interview transcript or one particular variable in that data set. So what to include as documentation. Examples here include a methodology file, so explaining how the data was collected, you know, information such as sample size, fieldwork protocols, also including a code book if one exists, a user guide. As I mentioned before, blank versions of the consent form and information sheet. The questionnaire that was used, a data list. And we're going to have a closer look at what the data list is in a moment. And of course, any links to reports or publications based on the data that you are sharing. Also, if there's any data out there that the data you are depositing or you're sharing can be linked to, you also need to let us know, because that will factor into that disclosure risk. Of course, if the data can be linked to other data that perhaps may make the data more identifiable, then we need to know about that as well. Okay. Because I mentioned the data list, so here we have an example. So this file will need to be uploaded along with qualitative data. And here we have an information, we have an example of what information it could contain. So again, this is project specific, of course. Of course, projects will differ in what information they will collect. So the columns would be very different here. We also have a template for this that you can just download and fill in, and I included the link at the end of the presentation as well. So we refer to this as a map to the collection because it provides an at-a-glance summary of all the files that have been archived. This is very useful, and we found it very useful in the past for new users wanting to use data, but also for ourselves as depositors if we were to come back to our projects in a few years' time, and we're searching for a particular transcript, for example. We know exactly. This would help us to find that particular transcript rather than having to open each individual file and looking through it. And also it helps for if someone were to, for example, to be interested in a subsample of our collection, for example, if they, in this example, if they only wanted to see transcripts from farms that were bigger than 300 hectares, for example, they would know exactly which, because we have the file name as well, they know exactly which files to go open, as well as, they would have some minimal information about that transcript already, so the age, the farmer code, etc., the farm type. Okay, other practical considerations during a project would include making sure that we organize data and documentation logically and in a manner that is easy to understand. So making sure that we group files by date, data type, or location. So for example, if the project covers more than one location or more than one country, for example, and that they follow a hierarchical structure. Also make sure to use version control for files if needed, so that it's easy to identify what the final version of the document is. Keeping data organized, especially if we're talking about a larger project, is very, very useful when it comes to sharing that data. Because we can, in the case of ReShare, we would have to upload individual folders, and those folders would be separate by data type. We wouldn't just upload one big folder including everything, and we're going to have a look at how that works in a second. The logic behind that is because documentation files will have to be open access, right? We don't restrict access to documentation. So that would have to be separate. Then depending on the data type and if it's a mixed methods project, it might be that, there's a qualitative element that would need to be under more restricted access levels. So that would be in one folder. And there might be, for example, a survey, which has been, more easily anonymized, and that can be put, for example, under a less restricted access level. So really our goal is to make data as, I'm sure you've heard of the phrase, as open as possible, as closed as necessary. So meaning we are trying to, talking about data files, to make them, to place them under an access level that is as open as possible, of course, taking into account all restrictions that might apply to that. And to be able to do that, we have to, it really helps if we keep data organized to help us in that sense. Okay. And moving on to some access information. So at the UK Data Archive, we operate a three-tier approach. The first is open access, which is available to anyone from our online catalog without the need to register or sign a license. This is applied to data that has been, categorized as non-disclosive, so all identifying information has been removed before publication. I'm sorry. The second category is safeguarded, and there are different versions of this option depending on the data we're discussing, right? So safeguarded data can be accessed by registered users who have to sign our end user license, but depending on the particularities of the data deposited, it might be that special conditions need to be met, such as obtaining permission from the depositor. Also embargoes might be applied for limited periods of time to allow the researchers to publish their findings. And finally, we have controlled access, and this is where we would have very sensitive data or data that cannot be anonymized without making it unusable, right, for future users. And this is available for remote or safe room access. And the researchers need to complete a training course, and they need to pass a test as well before being able to access this data. As mentioned during the presentations, we have I included some more information for you to have a look at. So we have plenty of information on data management and best practice data management on our website. I also included the link to the CESDA Data Management Expert Guide. This is a very useful resource. So please do have a look if you'd like to learn more. Also, we have a book, Managing and Sharing Research Data, published by Sage. It is available online as well. It's very easy to find. And we also run other we run recurring webinars and workshops, and you can sign up for them on our event page. Also, the data management webinar I mentioned that ran last week, you should be able to find it there as well with the slides. I mentioned earlier that we have some templates that you can just download and use, for example, for the data list. So I included the links here for you. Also, we have a model consent form as well that you can download and adapt to your project, a transcription template, instructions, a transcription confidentiality agreement. So I will let you have a look at these if you need them. I also included some further, again, some further resources that are related. So on research data management, on the expert guide from CESDA, the DMP online. So this is if you're at the beginning of your project and you need to set up a data management plan. Some information on anonymizing research data, and a guide to social science preparation and archiving as well. Please do follow us online. So I linked here our YouTube channel as well, if you'd like to see previous recordings of our webinars. And any other, you can follow us on Twitter. And you can contact us as well if you have any questions. Upcoming events, so as I mentioned, you can sign up for these from our events page, just to give you a quick peek at what is coming up. If you might be interested in, for example, copyright or census data, please, or consent issues and data sharing, please have a look at our events page. And now we're going to move on to the demonstration. So I am going to stop sharing my screen for a second so I can make the transition to ReShare. Bear with me for 20 seconds. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen. Okay, so this is the ReShare homepage. And this is how it looks like. I've already logged in. As I mentioned, the steps, you will first have to register with the UK Data Service, and you'll have to sign our end user license and just agree to some terms and conditions, of course. And then you can log in. You can log in using you can register using your institution credentials or university credentials. Or you can we can create some credentials for you that you can just use for the UK Data Archive. So once you've registered and logged in, this is how the homepage will look like. And you won't have all the options here. I am an administrator, so I have some extra, but you will just see my data, right? And if I just click on my data, this is where we start the deposit process. I should mention that so if you are planning on creating a data collection, or sharing data via ReShare, you can start doing that now at the same time. We can create a data collection together if you wish, or you can just follow, of course, and do it at a later point. So I won't go, of course, into too much detail because we don't have the time for me to fill in all the information, but I'll go through the main most important aspects that you need to consider. So this is my account. These are collections that that I already published, that I created in the past. I don't know why my mouse stopped working. Sorry. There we go. So if you want to create more than one collection for your project, when you go into my data, you should have them listed here. They should, as long as you save them, and we'll have a look at where to do that. you should always be able to find them in your work area, and just clicking on this yellow option here, yellow pencil, you can edit them. To create a new data collection, we'll just have to select data collection. Before that, we included here some information for you just in case you need them. So information about how to bundle files, some guidance on recommended file formats, file naming, creating a README file for your collection, what that should include, what essential documentation is to upload with your data list that we've discussed, etc. We also have a template for the README file, and if you click on this link, it should take you to the template, and you can see the link in the corner of the screen. So yes, have a look at that, and then, sorry, the connection is quite slow, so I'm using my mouse, but it's not it is not working. I'm trying to close this. Okay, I won't close it because it doesn't seem to let me close it. Okay, so once you had a look at that, we can go on and create a new data collection. I should have mentioned that, so in the home page, you can see there's some information at the top here on legal. There's some legal information on the different access levels and the terms and conditions that apply to that. There's also information here on review procedures. So that would be, the kind of checks that we do once a record is coming into review, so that if you look at that, you know what we're looking for, and hopefully save time, so we won't have to send the collection back to you. So this is the first page. Once we start creating a data collection, as you can see, there's 6 different sort of sections at the top. So we have terms and conditions, grant details, people, data collection, upload, and deposit. You can move to the next section once you've filled in all the mandatory fields. All the mandatory fields are marked with a pink asterisk. In this section, so we would just have to pretty much agree to the terms and conditions. We cannot move forward before we do that, unless we do that. You can read them here. I included a link, and also please read through this information. This is copyright information, so you're confirming that you are the owner of the copyright, and that there is nobody else that that owns any IP in the data that you are depositing. Okay, so once we agree to that, we can move on to the next step. So we have moved on to grant details. So here, if you're funded by the UKRI, you can just put the grant number in this field here, and that information should be populating all these fields. So I'm going to start. So I'm taking a break from that. I'm going to our data catalog. This is where you can find this is our website and our data catalog, and where you can find all our data collections. And I'm going to use an example collection, right? So I have the number of my collection, and I'm just going to click search. So this is a collection that's already been published. It's been published for 2 years now, and I'm just going to use it as an example in this case. So as you can see, we have all the information here. This has been published via ReShare. So all this information has been put into the system at the time of when the collection was created. So I just needed this grant number to copy in here. So I should mention that we are aware that at the moment there's a problem with the API. So this will not work at the moment, but usually it's unfortunate because we did try to fix this before the webinar today. But usually, once you put in the grant number here, the grant information should appear. You should be able to select it, and then all these fields will be populated from Gateway to Research. This is the UKRI page, and this is the project we are using at the moment. So if we click on this, all this information would have been populated automatically into our ReShare collection, right? So to the project title, project description, the sponsor here is, the default is the ESRC, but of course you can type this, you can redact this if it's not applicable, or you can add more than one, etc. Yeah, so apologies for that not working. It is something we're fixing at the moment. But that applies just to this section, right? So just to the grant details section that would be imported from the Gateway to Research page. The rest of the collection we'll have to fill in ourselves. Okay, so you can also notice that there's some arrows on the side of the screen, and this will apply to several fields. So in the case of sponsors here, you can move up or down depending on, if you want to have one listed first or one listed before the other, depending on perhaps the contribution that they had to the project. That also applies to grant holders. So if you'd like to have someone listed first, probably for example, the PI, etc. Project dates, again, this will also be populated. The save for later, so I mentioned earlier when we looked at my data and all the collections I had in there, I said, make sure that you save a collection. If you save a collection, you'll have it in your work area. This is where you save it from. So if I were to, hit save for later, and I would go back into my data, I would see it listed there. Okay, I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to move on to next. So we are now in the people section. So here for data creators, as you can see, they're all the fields here have an asterisk. So we do have to fill in this information. So data creators, these would be the people that would appear in the citation. So going back to my example, so this is the collection that has already been published. We have, sorry, let's go to access data from ReShare repository. So this is how it would look, and this is the citation here. And as we can see, there's only one data creator here. However, there can be as many as applicable. We can add as many rows as we want. We need to add the name, the email, affiliation, and ORCID number. And moving on to right owners, so this would be people that own the copyright. So if in the course of your project it's just data you've collected for that particular project, then it's usually the data creators or the the PIs and the co-Is that own copyright. If, for example, you're doing a qualitative study and there might be the case that your participants own some of the copyright, for example, in the case of diary data, and you will have to address that in the consent form information sheet. So the model template consent form I showed you on the presentation slides, that includes copyright information as well, so you can adapt that as necessary. Contact information, so this is also very important in the case of, if any of our users would have any questions about the data, this would be someone that they can contact. It doesn't have to be the PI, it can be anybody in the team, someone you delegate to receive any queries. Also, you'll notice that for some of the fields, we have a question mark, and if you click on that, sorry. Okay, there should be just some information about what exactly you should be including in that section. Okay, there's also a contributors section here. This is, if you wanted to give credit to anybody, or if you had any, any research assistants that you'd also like to mention. This is optional. As you can see, there is no asterisk. We can save this again, so we can stop here, or we can move on to the next section. If you haven't filled in date information in fields that have an asterisk, it won't let you move on, right? So in this case, we haven't put in any information, and it's not letting me move on. I'm just going to fill in some, and I cannot. This is what I meant by I'm going to move very quickly through some of these. I'm not going to fill in all the information. I can move on to the next section by selecting it. So that is one thing that that you can do as well. But of course, you cannot deposit the collection without having all the fields completed, right? So you can do this at a later point. You can save it in your work area and stay there. But before you deposit the collection for review, make sure that you don't have any more warnings at the top, okay? The data collection title. So, I mean, we have this title. I'm just going to, oh, this is, okay. Right, and we have a data description abstract as well. So this would be information about the data collected. So this is different from the grant information. This refers particularly to the data, and as I'm sure you know, this can change in the course of a project as well. It might be that you decide to collect more or less data than initially anticipated. It might be that you go for you go for an additional research question, or so any changes then they would need to be reflected in here. So this would describe exactly the data that can be found in this data collection, and I can just copy that as well. So this is the data description abstract. As you can see in the collection, you'll have both. So at the very top, this is the grant information. This is the information that was pulled in from Gateway to Research. And then this is the information that the depositor submitted in this field. So I'm just going to do that as well. Okay. Then we have keywords, and this is a controlled vocabulary. So as you start typing in, options will appear. You can select what applies. So if we just start typing, for example, refugees, we have a few options. We add that. We recommend that you add as many keywords as possible, because this will make your collection more more easy to find in our catalog, right? Again, you see the question marks on the side. Do click on them if you're not sure what information to add. Moving on, we have topic classification. So this would be whatever applies to that collection. As we can see here, if we have social welfare policy and systems, if we go back, we choose that as well. Okay, we can add more than one, of course, if more than one applies. Then we have temporal coverage. So this is collection period and temporal coverage. These are different. So of course, the collection period applies, if I'm collecting the data this year, then that would be April 2022 to September 2022. Temporal coverage, this is the data that actually applies to. So if we were to be interested in the Second World War, then that would obviously be different than the data that we're putting for a collection period. That's why they differ there. As you can see, there's no asterisks here, but we do recommend that you, even for fields that don't have an asterisk, the more information you provide, the better. So always keep that in mind and try to fill in as much information as possible. Next, we have geographical coverage. So we have countries here. I believe for this particular collection, there were quite a few. So we have France, Germany, Greece, Lebanon. So we can add them here. Again, it's a controlled vocabulary. We can order them. So I've just moved France to up. So that's how the arrows work. If you have a preference, of course, for the order. If not, it's fine. You can add the more disaggregated. So if, for example, we have United Kingdom, but in particular, we have London, then we can add that. Paris, etc. Okay, then we have spatial unit. So as you can see, there's no asterisk, but if this applies, then please do select what applies here. Then we have methodology. So the data collection method, this is another field that is very important because it describes the methodology that was used. As we can see here, we have data collection method here. So, you know, they're unstructured, in-depth qualitative interviews. Okay, I'm just gonna copy that in there as well. Okay, again, question marks if we are unsure what to include. Then we have the observation unit. In this case, they're individual interviews, so we're going to do individual. We have household, time unit, etc. So just select what applies. Then we have kind of data. In this case, it would be text. Okay, data sourcing, processing, and preparation. So this would be any information about you know, if we were to use secondary data, then we would provide the information here as well. Any software that we used to process the data, to clean the data, and processes that were used, and that sort of information preparation would need to be detailed here. Then we have type of data, and in this case, we have qualitative and mixed methods data. Resource language. So we do have data collections in languages that in other languages than English, but if that is the case, what we usually say is that unless we have someone, of course, in the archive that or in our team that speaks that particular language, we will ask you as the depositor to confirm that you know, first that the data has been processed and pseudonymized in line with what the participants have agreed to. And we will need that confirmation in writing. So if there were any issues at some point, we need to have that in writing from you. For data that is not in English, we also recommend that there is if the data is not translated, of course. So it might be that the data has also been translated in English, so that is fine. But if it's not translated, then a short summary in English at the beginning of the transcript, it's a very good idea, and we recommend that where possible. Okay, that is also covered in our review procedures if you want to read a bit more on data collected in foreign languages. Related resources, so this would be, as I mentioned in the presentation, if there's any data that the data you are depositing can be linked with, then you need to let us know and provide us the link, the DOI here for that data. If there are any publications that have already, you know, they're already available, then you also need to include the link in here. As you can see, you can select the type of resource. So it can be a data collection, it can be a publication or a website. If there's a website for your project, you can also add it in here. And this is, of course, you can have as many rows as needed. Then we have notes on access, and this is not something that appears on the website once the collection is published. This is just notes for the reviewers. So if, for example, there were any concerns about, you know, the access level, if you want to tell us, okay, there are a few interviews that are a bit more problematic than others, I would like these to be, you know, put under permission only, for example, or, you know, you can tell us that, I don't know, I conducted 50 interviews and only 20 of them gave me permission to share. So I only included 20 interviews in here. Or so it's really any information that would help us sort of understand and provide us with some more information about at the point of reviewing the data collection. Also embargoes, if you would like to apply an embargo on the data, you're still working on the publications, for example, please mention that in here so we can apply it. With embargoes as well, I should mention that the default is 12 months. So we initially we would only apply an embargo for 12 months from the date of publication. However, if, you know, and it happens that the publications would not be out by then we can extend that. So we would ask you to be in touch if the embargo needs to be extended. Okay, and you won't see this. This is just for admin, for administrators. Okay, so we can save this so we can move on. I'm just going to move on. As you can see, I haven't filled in the access category field, which I need to do, but because that is actually a field in the review in the in this area, so actually it doesn't apply to depositors. So I'm going to move on to upload. So this is where we upload all the data, all the documentation files, etc. We have some guidance here at the top. So large files, you know, bigger than 2 gigabytes, it might be that it takes more time. Make sure that the data doesn't contain any disclosive information. Unless, of course, you have consent to share that information. So, for example, if you obtained consent from your participants to publish the data, you know, including their making their identities known, then that is fine, as long as that is clearly covered in the consent form and they have agreed to it. But otherwise, the data would need to be pseudonymized, de-identified, or anonymized in line with what participants agreed to. Okay. Okay, and make sure that file names don't contain any spaces, because that would not look very good when we look at the file name once it's published. Okay, so at this point we can just choose a file from our folders, and I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a second there so that I can find the correct folder without showing anything sensitive on the screen. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen again. Okay, so I found my the folder that I was going to use for this, and I have a zip folder here just named transcripts. So I'm gonna select open. Okay, and it's already been uploaded. As we discussed, we can choose the access level and the license. So if we click on expand here, we have accessible to. So the options here would be, you know, open data accessible to any user, safeguarded, accessible to registered users. You can see here our terms and conditions for open and safeguarded data as well, if you need to. And here we can choose the access level, right? So open access, registered, or closed. So this would be either that, you know, you told us that you'd like an embargo, or there would be the users would need to apply for permission from yourself to use the data. So that is in the case of particularly sensitive data, so data that cannot be necessarily made available without reducing very valuable information. Okay, so for this, I'm gonna choose registered because it's a zip folder with transcripts. You can also select here the type of file you are uploading. So this is data. As you can see, we have either data documentation bundle, documentation file, additional metadata, data, or README file. In this case, it is data. I can also include a file description here. So I can say 40 transcripts. Okay. Embargo date, so you can select this as well, the particular date. Perhaps you don't need 12 months, perhaps you only need 6 months, so you can select that in here. Then we have the license, so this is, of course, this needs to match the access level. So in the case of safeguarded data, then we would have our end user license, and I'm going to select that. If you're not sure what access level or what license information to choose, don't worry, because this is something that, of course, we discuss with you when the collection comes into review. We would always, there would be a conversation. We wouldn't just go ahead and apply an access level or apply a license condition without consulting with you. So at the point of the collection coming into review, we would get in touch with you and provide you any feedback if there's still edits need to be done to the collection, return the collection to you if that is necessary. And also, as part of that feedback, we would also discuss the possibility of not the possibility, but discuss any information that still needs to be resolved about license or access. Okay, so this is done for this file. I'm going to upload a README file as well here. And again, same, because this is it's a README file, so it doesn't have to be put under access restrictions. I'm going to select open. This is a README file. You can add information here if you like, but I skip that. And then this is CC BY. It doesn't need to be more restricted. Okay, and so as you can see, you can upload as many files as you wish. The most important thing is to have them organized and to have them bundled up, depending on the type of data, the type of file, the type of data, so that we can easily apply access restrictions. So this is the data list. Again, this is a piece of documentation, so I'm gonna select that here. And again, CCY. Okay, so at this point, I can save this for later. If I'm perhaps not sure, there are also, for example, projects where other members of the team want to have a look at the collection before it's submitted for review. That is possible. So we would have to go through an administrator. You cannot just, please do not share any credentials with anybody. Those are individual, for yourself. If you have to share with a colleague, if a colleague would like to edit or upload any more files, then get in touch with us and we will transfer the data collection to their work area. So they would also have to register with us, and then we will transfer the record. They would be able to edit it. So that is how that can be done. So as I said, at this point, if we move forward, we'll be submitting the collection for review. So I'm gonna select next. At this point, you'll be reminded of all the fields that you perhaps forgot to edit. So please go back, don't submit collections for review if you haven't provided all the information, because they will just come back to you, right? So we cannot, there needs to be sufficient information, so in terms of the metadata, right? So all this information we are providing here is what is referred to as metadata, and every collection needs to have a sufficient amount of metadata before it is published. So make sure that you fill that in. Again, you go through some terms and conditions, just making you aware before you submit the data collection. As I said, if you're ready to submit, you can deposit the collection now, or you can save it for later. For this exercise, I'm not going to submit it because it is just it is just an exercise. I am going to save it for later, however. Okay, and now if I go into, all right, so this, as right after I saved it, I can see the information I've submitted, right? I just filled in. So I have the title, the abstract, the data creator. Of course, I only typed in a name, so you can see the affiliation and everything else is missing. We have the grant reference, we have the keyword that we added, we have London and Paris as we added country, the data collection method, right? So all the information we just submitted is here now, and we also have the available files that we uploaded. So we have that transcripts folder. If we click on the expand section here, it shows us the information the options we selected. So this is registered data for the transcripts, the license, so we can also click on this and read it if necessary, file size. We have the data list we uploaded, we have the README file, okay? And this is information, this is metrics. So once the collection is published, I can show you in this collection here, which is already published. If we scroll all the way down, as we can see, we have all the available files, all the interviews that have been uploaded for this collection. And under the download section, we have information about how many times the data has been uploaded, how many times this page has been viewed, and there's a few more, well, there's more statistics if we select this option here. And then we have related resources. So this would be, you know, I believe this is the Gateway to Research page that we saw here. So that is also included by default in all the collections. Once that information is imported, which didn't work today, that's why we don't have it, we can add it. And again, this is a documentary trailer, so really any information that is applicable can be added. Also, there's some altmetric information here. So this has been tweeted, for example, by twice. So as you can see here, we have supporting information, we have the consent form in English, we have a README file. Okay, going back to our collection, so we don't have any related resources because we didn't add any. If we wanted to go back and edit this, we have options at the top here. So this is just the preview. We have details, we have actions, history, and issues. If we go on to actions, edit collection, we go back into edit mode. We remember we have the 3 sections. We go into data collection all the way down. We can add a website here. So this would be the link to the Gateway to Research website. So this would be okay, and that is the website, and we can easily just, if we save that for later, there it is already added. So we have the website, and if we click on it, there it is. Okay, so that is pretty much it in terms of the deposit process. So we can, you know, we also have the option here at the top to deposit the item. So once we're ready and we're happy with everything, depositing for review can be done here. There's also some FAQs at the top. If you have any questions, do check that, because it might be that others have also had the same question before. And yeah, that's pretty much what the deposit process is in ReShare. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I think we're going to take questions next. Let me check if there were any more. Okay. Okay, so this is where we left off in the presentation. So if you want to create a data collection, go to ReShare, register, log in, create a new data collection, and then we went through everything else, and that is the end. I included here my email address, so if you have any questions about if you're creating a data collection and you're stuck anywhere or you're not sure, do drop me an email and I'll be happy to help.